For centuries, people have tried to make contact with the dead. Some seek closure, others chase proof. A few just want to hear one final word from someone lost. But history has shown that reaching into the unknown rarely ends the way we expect. Tonight, we examine 5 real encounters, documented cases where individuals crossed a line they could never uncross. Their stories are not legends, and for those who lived through them, the fear never truly ended. From seance rooms and forgotten asylums to whispers in the dark and calls from the grave, these stories reveal what happens when the dead answer and refuse to let go. In 1922, inside an isolated English manor, a widow named Eleanor Whitmore sat across from a woman who claimed she could speak to the dead. The candlelight flickered. The air felt heavy. And as the seance began, Eleanor whispered one name: her son's. Madame Blackwood was known for her abilities. People came to her with grief, questions, and desperate hopes. That night, Eleanor wasn't the only one in the room. There were 3 others, each with their own reasons for being there, each believing they were about to witness a harmless conversation with the other side. The doors were locked, the curtains drawn, the seance was about to begin, and within minutes it became clear. Someone or something was listening. At first it was subtle, a shift in the air, the scent of burning wax growing stronger. Then the first knock, slow, deliberate, and impossibly loud. Madame Blackwood asked the spirit to come forward. Eleanor clutched her locket. The table trembled beneath their hands. The knocking turned into scratching, deep, sharp sounds like nails dragging across wood. Then a whisper, low, breathy, and impossible to place. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. A voice speaking a name. Not Eleanor's son. Not anyone they knew. A name no one wanted to hear. One of the guests gasped, clutching his throat. His chair slid back on its own. The candle flames stretched higher, bending unnaturally, as if reaching for something unseen. The seance was no longer under control, and then the final sign came, something no one in that room would ever forget. The temperature dropped in an instant. The flames turned blue, and then the voice changed. It was no longer a whisper. It was loud, guttural, angry. The knocking turned into pounding, shaking the table, the floor, the walls. The mirror behind them cracked, splitting straight down the center. Madame Blackwood's hands convulsed, her eyes rolled back, and then she spoke. But the voice that came out was not her own. "You were never meant to call me." The seance ended in chaos. The guests fled, the door flung open as if by unseen hands. Eleanor was last to leave, staring at the shattered mirror. Her son's name had never been spoken again that night. But something else had arrived, something that didn't leave when they did. The Blackwood Manor was abandoned within the year. Those who attended the seance suffered strange occurrences, whispers in the night, objects moving on their own, the sensation of being watched. Some never spoke of that night again. Others weren't given the choice. The house remained standing. The mirror was never repaired, and those who pass by claim they still hear the knocking, always at the same hour, always in threes. In 1976, audio researcher Daniel Reese set out to prove what many refused to believe, that the dead could speak through sound. Using early electronic voice phenomenon technology, he ventured into one of the most notorious abandoned asylums in the country. What he captured that night would never let him go. The asylum had been empty for decades, its halls silent except for the wind that seeped through broken windows. But Daniel was convinced that silence was just a mask. With his reel-to-reel recorder, he sat in the center of what had once been the patient intake ward and pressed record. Then he asked a question. "Is anyone here?" At first, there was nothing, just static, the soft hum of the machine. But when he played the tape back, he wasn't alone. Through the white noise, something faint emerged, a whisper just below the range of normal hearing. He played it again, slowing the speed. The whisper became a voice, barely audible, stretched and distorted. It said his name. Daniel froze. No one knew he was there. No one had been in the building for years. But the voice, it was waiting for him. He adjusted the mic, asked another question. "Who are you?" The response came faster this time, a wordless murmur growing louder, a sound like laughter but wrong. Then something new, a scraping noise, not from the tape but from the room itself. The air changed. The static in his headphones crackled violently, as if the frequency itself was resisting him. And then the voice returned, clearer than before, speaking 3 words that would follow him for the rest of his life. "Let me out." Daniel yanked off his headphones. His breath was heavy, his pulse hammering. The room was silent again, but only to his ears. He rewound the tape, pressed play. The voice was still there, louder now, the words overlapping, distorting. Then came a sound he never recorded, footsteps moving toward him, faster, heavier, closing in. He ran, left everything behind, his equipment, his notes, the tape still spinning on the recorder. He never stepped foot in the asylum again. A week later, his equipment was retrieved, but the tape was missing. No one knew what happened to it. No one wanted to look for it. Daniel Reese abandoned his research. He refused interviews, ignored calls from other investigators. The only thing he ever said about that night was this: "Some voices aren't meant to be heard." What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this, check out our other horror stories here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, unless you're afraid of who might be watching.